that in baptism, we're all incorporated into this one family of God on an equal basis. When people were baptized in the very early church, they kind of did it themselves. I mean, there were witnesses, but they did the actions themselves because people understood that the real actor in baptism was God. And so in the very early church, men were baptized and men witnessed it, and women were baptized and women witnessed it, because you would come up to this baptismal font or pool, and it might be outside, but it might not be outside. And they would come up to it and they would take off all of their clothes until they were absolutely, totally nude. You want church services like that? And they would go down into the water totally naked, leaving their old clothes behind, never to be worn again. And words would be said over them. And there is much evidence that some of the words that were said are quoted by Paul here. And it's very ritualistic the way he puts it. Now there is neither Jew or Greek. Now there is neither. Notice how it's repeated. Now there is neither slave nor free. Now there is neither slave or free, or male or female. And then you would come, there would be other things said over you, and you would have immersed yourself in the water, and then you would come up. You would be declared clean. You would be declared a part of the family of God. You would come up the other side and receive a new set of clothes, a white robe, that in many parts of the church you wore for the whole next week. I'm not sure how white it was at the end of the week, but you would wear it through that week, and there was a special week of instruction and things like that. But the point of the baptism imagery here that Paul is using is that you leave your old identity in the past. It's in the past. You go down with no identity, totally transparent and naked before your God. You're given a new identity that's one that's clothed with the righteousness, with the very nature, with the very being of Jesus. Our identity is not found in our old assumptions, in our old parentage, in our own ancestry, or anything that was in our minds from the time before we were born until the day that we were baptized, the day that we were clothed in Jesus. All of that old identity is gone. I don't mean that it no longer affects you. I don't mean that you're no longer, that I'm no longer Fitzgerald and that my father was Ralph Fitzgerald. But that's not the core of my identity anymore. My identity is found in Jesus Christ. Your identity is found in Jesus Christ. And your identity, and your identity, and your identity. Our identity is not in the fact that my identity is not in that my ancestors come from England and Scotland and were illegitimate children of a lord. My identity is not in that. And that's the etymology of Fitz, is illegitimate. My identity is in Jesus. My identity is not in the Ray family, even though it's part of my DNA. My identity is in Jesus. My identity is not in any education I have or haven't had. I'm not a computer scientist, even though I have a degree in computer science. I am not a mathematician, even though I have a degree in mathematics. I am not a theologian, even though I have more than one theology degree. My identity is in Jesus. I am not a Missourian, even though that's where I come from. I'm not a Kansan, even though that's where I live. I'm not an American at core in my identity. I'm not an American. I am clothed in Jesus. I am part of the family of God. And the same thing is true of you. You're no longer those things. Those things aren't part of your identity. They're part of your history. They're part of your heritage, but they're not part of your identity anymore. And that's an important distinction to make. They may be things you celebrate, but only as part of your heritage, not as part of your identity. My identity is in one thing and one thing alone, and that's Jesus Christ. But that is an offer that God has made to the entirety of the human race. Anyone who puts their faith in Jesus can leave their heritage as an identity behind and take up a new identity that's only in Jesus. It doesn't make any difference if you're a man or a woman. I'm happy that I'm a man and not a woman. I mean, there are things women put up with that I would never be able to put up with, probably because I'm a man. I mean, my experience is that women work 3 times as hard as men do, and men think they work 10 times harder than the women. But they don't. They're just deluded. My experience is of women who are in the pastorate that they have to be 3 times the pastor of a man to be considered equal to that man. I'm happy that I'm a man. I would never want to go through the pain of childbirth. But in Jesus, there's no distinction made there. Everyone is clothed and given the same identity, that of Jesus Christ. I'm happy that I came from a middle-class family, poverty to middle-class family, and that the family heritage I have, but it doesn't make any difference whether you were rich or poor or when you were growing up or even now. It doesn't make any difference if you had a high-end kind of background, like, I kind of had a high-end background. My mother had a master's degree in mathematics, and she taught high-end math in high school, and so she's an educator. My grandmother was an educator. My aunt was an educator. My uncle did spy antennas for the government. You see, my grandfather on my father's side, he was a college professor in English, and my father was a pastor. I mean, I come from pretty elite stock. But someone who's a sewage worker, someone who is a grave digger, they're no different with Jesus because we're all included in that one identity of Jesus. Doesn't make any difference if you came from the United States and your heritage is in the United States. I am overjoyed that my heritage is from the United States of America. There are many privileges and benefits that I enjoy that other people of the world don't enjoy. Compared to the rest of the world, I'm like in the top, 0.2% or 0.6% in terms of wealth, even at my income level. I don't deal with the wars that others do because, Jesus.